All right, day 2 of recording commonly asked questions in the recovery audit space while walking my dog Fluffy. Today I want to talk about a contract compliance topic and a very general question that we get quite a bit, which is where do we typically see value leaking out in contract compliance audits? Meaning, when we're identifying issues, where do they typically stem from? I thought about this for a second. I'd really place it into two general categories. One is going to be complexity, and the other is going to be ambiguity. So whether you're talking about rate cards, whether you're talking about cost pass-through, whether you're talking about price changes based on indexes, the thing that we're generally going to look for in a contract compliance audit is going to be, is there a significant amount of complexity in the term? Complexity from the perspective of how difficult it would be to follow, or complexity from the perspective of how difficult it would be to calculate. The second one, and maybe even more important, is the concept of ambiguity. So when you have contractual terms that have ambiguity, when you have an operational environment that is likely makes it impossible to define every single component of how something is supposed to be billed, those are generally great opportunities to perform a contract compliance audit. The reason why is it's nothing nefarious from suppliers and vendors. It's just there are going to be times when there isn't clear definition of what billing mechanism or billing approach should be taken on a specific topic. And it's not unusual to have suppliers take either an aggressive approach or at minimum not have the conversation they should have with the client. I use the term maverick spend a ton, right? So I have a contract that says, widget A costs $10, widget B costs $15, and there's a lot of activity in widget C. That's what I would call maverick spend. There's not a defined term for how much it costs. Ideally, you want a supplier to raise that topic with you and say, hey, how are we going to treat widget C? But often what we see in these contract compliance audits is instead of doing that, they charge $30. And they're not technically wrong from a contractual perspective, but often from a relationship perspective, that's a conversation you would have expected to take place. So the value we see in these contract compliance audits come from obviously the recovering the dollars where someone has clearly overbilled or billed not in line with the contractual terms, but two, defining the gaps, defining the areas where it's not clear what they should have done, and therefore we want to move into a situation where we can define that moving forward. So aside from that, when it comes to the complexity side, to get more pointed, we're looking at topics like cost pass through. We're looking at price changes based on indexes. We're looking at anything related to labor, anything related to a visit. So you think of like a waste management company, you think of a lawn service, you think of HVAC, all those things create quite a bit of complexity to make sure that you're only being billed for actual services being delivered, and that you're not being billed on a schedule even if the service isn't delivered. So those are the areas we really look for when we're trying to build out a contract compliance program. Let's get into a lot of services. Let's get into a lot of areas where we have complex contractual relationships by nature of the operational work. And then let's get into areas where we know there's ambiguity. And I know this is a little longer than I said, 2 minutes, but the ambiguity, the way we get to that as auditors is one, looking at the contract, but more commonly is having conversations with our clients and the key contacts and asking them, how do you feel about the bills? How comfortable are you with what you're being charged for? Very often when you start to hear someone say, hey, I don't know if I'm billing correctly or incorrectly, I just don't really know how to get my arms around this topic, that's a great candidate to look into. So in short, if you have suppliers and vendors that you're looking at, you're considering doing contract compliance auditing work, ask yourselves, Is there a situation where I just don't feel like I have my arms around that? If you do, consider doing a contract compliance audit. Again, day 2. Appreciate you getting through the video if you did. And have a great 2026. Bye.